fifth day of the textual workshop on Abhidhammatthasan. Today we have Professor Pradeep Gokhale from Pune with us, and he will speak on Buddhist approach to mind, descriptive and normative. So before the formal start of the lecture, we have a tradition to introduce our speaker. So I am going to read the brief biodata of Professor Gokhale. Professor Pradeep P. Gokhale was born on 2nd February 1953 and was awarded PhD for his work on fallacies discussed in ancient Indian logic, completed under the supervision of Professor S.S. Barlinge. He taught for 31 years in the postgraduate department of philosophy of Savitribai Phule University, Pune. Since January 2012, he was Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Research Professor, Chair Professor in Central Institute of Higher Tibetan Studies, Sarnath, till 2018. Presently, he is an honorary adjunct professor in the Department of Pali and Buddhist Studies, Savitribai Phule University, Pune. His research areas are classical Indian philosophy and logic, social philosophy, philosophy of religion, Ambedkar studies, and contemporary Buddhism. The books he authored includes Inference and Fallacies discussed in ancient Indian logic from Satguru publication, Lokayat, Charvak of Philosophical Inquiry, Oxford University Press, and Yoguttar of Patanjali, a new introduction to the Buddhist roots of the yogic system. This has been published from Routledge. The books edited by him include The Philosophy of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, IPQ publication, and Classical Buddhism, Neo-Buddhism, and the Questions of Caste, again from Routledge publication. He has, to his credit, around 60 articles in English and 70 articles in Marathi published in various journals and anthologies. So this is his brief biodata. And once again, I welcome you, sir. And you can start your lecture right now.
Thank you very much, Professor Baleshwar Yadav. Friends, Professor Yadav has allowed me kindly to talk about Buddhist approach to mind in general, though the present workshop is on particular Buddhist text, namely Abhidhammatthasan. When I saw the program of the workshop, I found that I am an odd man out. All other presentations pertain to some part of the text, rather they are textual studies. Mine will be an attempt to understand the Buddhist approach to mind in general. For the participants, I hope it will be just a sort of change from the routine. How far interesting it will be, I really don't know. Another clarification I would like to make is that my presentation would be largely descriptive and expository. Though occasionally I will be making some critical or analytical points which may invoke discussion, the scholars may not find anything new in my presentation. I can simply apologize for that. In fact, the presentation is based on a draft chapter on the Buddhist approach to mind, which I had written for an anthology on Buddhist psychology, rather anthology on Indian psychology. The idea of the anthology could not be actualized, but the draft chapter remained with me, which I have slightly revised for today's talk. As we are aware, Buddhism consists of many schools, and these different schools understand mind and its operations, and also human ideal in different ways. The broad division would be between Shravakayana, also called Hinayana, and Bodhisattvayana, also called Mahayana. In this paper, my main focus will be on Shravakayana, and I will refer to a few ideas of Mahayana psychology only at the end. Under Shravakayana, again, we have different schools such as Theravada, Vaibhashika, and Sautrantika. There are many differences among these schools in many details, in this presentation, I am not focusing on the differences, but treating them together. So I am using the works like Vasubandhu's Abhidharma Kosha and Bhashya, which belongs to Vaibhashika and Sautrantika schools. And I am also using the Theravada texts such as Abhidhammatthasan and of Anuruddhacharya and Visuddhimagga of Buddha Kosh. The presentation will be divided into three parts. In the first part, I will give a descriptive account of the notion of person, mind, and operations of mind. My discussion of the concept of person will be largely based on Abhidharma Kosha, and my discussion of mind and operations of mind will be based on Abhidhammatthasan. In the second part, I will deal with the normative side of Buddhist psychology with special emphasis on Buddhist meditation. This part of my talk will be largely based on Visuddhimagga. In the third part, I will make some points pertaining to Mahayana Buddhist approach to mind. Now, part one is understanding the concepts of person and mind. So first, analysis of the concept of a person. The concept of mind, variously called as Chitta, Manas, Vijnana or Vijnana, Nama, is a central concept in Buddhism as philosophy of religion, Buddhism as philosophy and also Buddhism as religion. The first two verses of Dhammapada clearly indicate this: Mano Pubbangama, Dhamma, Mano Setha, Manomaya, etc. The centrality of mind in Buddhism distinguishes it from other schools of Indian philosophy, mainly for two reasons. All the other schools which accept mind as an entity or a substance regard mind as subservient to another substance such as Atman, Jiva, such that mind, that is Manas or Antahkarana, becomes an instrument to be used by Atman or something to be controlled by Atman. Buddhism does not accept Atman or any other substance to which Manas is subservient or instrumental. Manas is itself a primary entity. Two, as a result of one, those systems which accept Manas as an entity subservient to Atman regard it as insentient, that is, Jada or Achetana. Even in Patanjali's yoga, as it is traditionally understood, though Chitta is central to yogic practice, is identified as Buddhi or Antahkarana of Sankhya metaphysics, and being a manifestation of Prakriti is naturally insentient. In Buddhism, Chitta is essentially conscious. Rather, Chitta is identified with consciousness. Narada, in his work on Abhidhammatthasan, refers to the etymological meaning of Chitta as Alambanam Chintayati iti Chittam. This is, of course, Sanskritized version. Here, Chintayati is to be taken in its most general sense, that is, awareness. Chintayati means Vijanati, which gives the etymological meaning of the word Vijnana. So, whatever is aware is Chitta. But since no agent like soul, which has awareness, is accepted, Chitta may better be defined as awareness of an object rather than someone who is aware. The Buddhists developed the concept of a person or a being in which mind is one of the elements. The one whom we call a person is not a composite substance, that is avayavi, nor does it possess a substantial core or a sense which others refer to as Atman or Jiva. Buddhists regard person as a collection of certain factors and analyze a person accordingly. Sometimes they give an analysis in terms of two factors, that is Nam and Rupa. Sometimes 5 factors, that is Skandhas. Sometimes 12 factors, that is Ayatanas. Sometimes 18 Dhatus. So let us consider them briefly. Nama Rupa. A broad analysis of person into Nam and Rupa, mind and body, is found in early Buddhist literature. For example, as a link in the 12-link chain of the dependently originating factors leading to suffering. It is said there that due to birth linking consciousness or rebirth consciousness, that is Patisandhi Vijnana, a new mind-body complex, that is Nama Rupa, is produced. Then analysis in terms of skandhas. A more elaborate analysis is made into 5 skandhas or aggregates. The 5 skandhas are Rupa, Vedana, Saudhya, Samskara, and Vijnana. Out of them, Rupa stands for body, producing sense organs. Vijnana stands for mind or chitta, and the remaining 3, that is Vedana, Saudhya, and Samskara, stand for mental states. Or mental factors termed as chaita or chetasika. In fact, Vedana and Saudhya are specific mental states, and Samskara can be taken as referring to all other mental states or mental factors. Vedana means sensation or feeling which may be pleasant or painful or neutral. Saudhya means perception in broad sense, which involves interpretation, designation, and conceptualization. Elaborate classification of mind and mental factors, that is chitta and chaita, is given in Abhidhamma literature, which we will see later. 2 more points need to be noted with reference to the skandha analysis. 1, though skandha analysis is popularly known as the analysis of a person, according to Abhidhamma literature, it gives a classification of all the Sanskrita dharmas, that is conditioned objects or phenomena, which include the objects of both subjective and objective world. Particularly, Rupa Skandha not only refers to sense organs and objects, but also to what is called avidnyapti, that is our unconscious associations with Mahabhutas. Skandha, second point about skandha, skandha literally means aggregate or heap. The word applies to Rupa Skandha because it is an aggregate of atoms. In an extended sense, the word skandha also applies to atoms. But the question arises about other skandhas because the mind and mental factors are not collections or collections of material particles. So many characteristics of other skandhas, that is mental aggregates, are due to the objects which the mental aggregates are about. Hence, grossness of consciousness is due to the grossness of the object of that consciousness. Yashomitra, while commenting on Abhidhammakosha Bhashya 1.20, says, Ayantu Vishesho Vedanadinam Audarikam Panchendriya Shrayam Vedanadi Chatushkam Amurtatvat Swagatam Audarikatvam Nasti. So, Vedana, Saudhya, Samskara, and Vijnana do not have Audarikatva, that is grossness by themselves. That grossness is only due to their objects. Now, we come to Ayatana analysis. Another elaborate classification of the elements of a person is given in terms of ayatanas. There are supposed to be 12 ayatanas consisting of 6 cognitive channels or doors and 6 types of objects. 5 sense organs and mind are the 6 cognitive channels, and 5 sense objects and the object of mind are 6 types of objects. This analysis is epistemologically oriented. Then there is Dhatu analysis. Dhatu analysis is further elaboration of Ayatana analysis. There are supposed to be 18 dhatus which are constituents of the world. The analysis consists of 12 ayatanas with the addition of 6 types of consciousness. Though all these classifications overlap with each other to a large extent, the last 2 classifications, that is those in terms of ayatanas and dhatus, are more exhaustive because they not only include conditioned objects, that is Sanskrita dharmas, but also unconditioned objects such as Akasha, Pratisankhya Nirodha, and Apratisankhya Nirodha. That is, Akash is space, Pratisankhya Nirodha, cessation of aggregates preceded by knowledge, and cessation of aggregates not preceded by knowledge. These unconditioned objects are included as the objects of consciousness. Though these abstract objects do not have any positive nature according to Abhidhammakosha, they are important because Akasha is an object of higher meditation, and the two types of cessation represent the final goal. The above classification of the factors of a person and also the factors of the universe at large include physical, cognitive, emotive, and cognitive aspects of a person, but they are presented in the framework of Anatmavada. That is why they do not refer to or imply any substantial or transcendental unity of human personality. According to Buddhists, the unity we impose on the human persons through the concepts like Atman, Sattva, Pudgala, or Jiva is just a false notion, a mentally constructed real, that is Prajnapti Sat, and not real in the strict sense of the term. Here, the terms Atman and Pudgala deserve some more discussion. The Buddha criticized Atmavada mainly from two perspectives in his second sermon called Anatta Lakkhana Sutta. One perspective was that Atman is supposed to be a controlling principle. If there were Atman, it would have been possible to control the operation of the five skandhas, but that is not possible. Hence, there is no Atman in the sense of a controlling substance. And second point or second perspective is that all skandhas are impermanent and painful. We cannot find I or mine, that is Atma or Atmiya, among such impermanent and painful objects. Here, a question can be asked. Though the Buddha's denial of the eternal self is well taken, can we not accept Atman in some non-eternalistic, non-metaphysical sense? The question is important for Buddhist philosophy and psychology because the principles like self-control or self-dependence are important for Buddhism. The statements like, may you be the island of yourself, atta dvipo bhava, or may you be the refuge of yourself, atta sarana bhavata, or atma sharano bhava. Oneself is the master of oneself, atteva attano natho. All these statements they incorporate the term atta and emphasize its centrality. This implies that Atman was accepted in Buddhism in an important sense, though it was denied in metaphysical sense. One can say that Atman was accepted in Buddhism in empirical and practical sense. Essentialization or hypostatization of this empirical practical self seems to have led some followers of the Buddha to accept Pudgalavada. Vatsiputriyas who advocated Pudgalavada did not accept Atman as a metaphysical reality. They accepted Pudgala as an essential bearer of mental as well as physical characteristics and something which transmigrates and also attains nirvana as a result of moral and spiritual practice. They did not regard it as eternal, but inexplicable, that is, avyakruta, as to whether essentially real or unreal. Such a concept of Pudgala is not closer to Atman of Nayayikas or Vedantins, nor to Purusha of Sankhyas, but probably it is closer to, say, Linga Sharira of Sankhyas or Jiva of Vedantins. From the Western tradition, P.F. Strawson's concept of person may be a close correlate of Pudgala. P.F. Strawson said that person is a primitive notion which is the common subject of both psychological and material predicates. He did not regard person as a metaphysical real in the sense of what is called metaphysical real, but only a primitive concept as a part of descriptive metaphysics. Acceptance of person as a logically primitive concept was not aimed at any metaphysical or soteriological goal, but it was aimed at solving many conceptual puzzles concerning body-mind problem and personal identity. Similarly, Vatsiputriyas did not mean to say that Pudgala is metaphysically real, but it has to be accepted for giving unity and integrity to experience and practice, though it is not explicable either as real or unreal, and it is not supposed to be either identical with skandhas or different from skandhas. So in that sense, it is supposed to be avyakruta. We see, however, that Pudgalavadins were in minority, and the Buddhist acharyas like Vasubandhu vehemently criticized Pudgalavad. The debate boils down to the question whether Pudgala is just a mental construction, though useful for some practical purpose, or is it real in some important sense? Vasubandhu claimed that Pudgala was just a mental construction. Though it is thought to be real, it is not real. I believe that Buddhists are right insofar as the denial of substantial or metaphysical self is concerned, but their approach to empirical self seems to be negative to a large extent. They seem many times to be advocating complete rejection of I and mine. I would personally prefer to talk in terms of I and mine and the transformation of I and mine, enrichment, purification, or elevation of I and mine, rather than complete elimination of these concepts. Buddhists did not use this language because use of such language in the ancient philosophical atmosphere immediately implied acceptance of eternal substantial Atman. In today's philosophical atmosphere, such an implication is not pressing upon us. Now, I shift to the next topic, that is the analysis of mind. So let us consider how the concept of mind was analyzed in Shravakayana Buddhism. We have seen that Buddhists understand mind, that is chitta, as consciousness, and they included it in different classifications of the constituents of a person and the world among skandha, ayatana, and dhatus. Buddhists also discussed independently the concepts of chitta and chaita, that is mind and mental factors. For instance, Abhidhammatthasan of Venerable Anuruddha Thera provides an elaborate classification of chittas and chaitas. It includes 89 types of chitta, which further, with further elaboration, 121 types and 52 types of chaita. Though understanding the classification fully is not intended here, at least a glimpse of the classification is absolutely necessary for having a clear picture of the Buddhist approach to mind. Buddhists made a distinction between chitta and chaita, but what is that distinction? Chitta is consciousness, but this is not consciousness consciousness, conscious substance like Atman, nor it is itself a substance. Secondly, it is not consciousness or knowledge in dispositional sense, but it is consciousness in episodic sense. So it is episodic consciousness, that is consciousness that occurs at a point of time. Any given occurring consciousness has certain aspects or characteristics which may appear as an object of consciousness, or which may characterize the consciousness without appearing as objects. All these features or states which characterize any given consciousness can be called a chaita or chetasika. These mental factors are supposed to be internally related to any given consciousness, and they are not like external objects. Here, a comparison with Nyaya Vaisheshika theory of consciousness, Nyaya Vaisheshika theory of knowledge may be fruitful. Nyaya Vaisheshika philosophers hold that cognition, desire, aversion, pleasure, pain, etc. are special qualities of Atman. They arise in Atman, are cognized by internal perception at the next moment, and then they cease to exist. They are just the objects of internal perception, and hence can exist for a moment without being perceived. They are not aspects of consciousness itself. In Buddhism, as against this, pleasure, pain, etc. are inseparable aspects of the relevant consciousness. Buddhists hold that there cannot be chaita without chitta. Now we come to the classification of chitta. Of course, this will be mostly a repetition for all of you. The 89 types of chitta, consciousness, that is consciousness, are counted in a hierarchical order in the following way. Kama Vachara, that is consciousness pertaining to sensuous sphere, there are of 54 types. Then Rupa Vachara, consciousness pertaining to form sphere, that is Rupa sphere, 15 types. Arupa Vachara, consciousness pertaining to formless sphere, the 12 types. And Lokuttara, that is supramundane consciousness, 8 types. Let us consider them briefly one by one. Kamavachara Chitta, this stands for the types of consciousness a being has in this realm of sensible objects. These types include morally good and morally bad consciousness, that is Shobhana Chitta and Akushala Chitta, and their resultant consciousness, that is Kushala Vipaka Chitta, Akushala Vipaka Chitta, and also what is called as functional consciousness, that is Kriya Chitta. Morally bad consciousness is the one which is accompanied by wrong views or passions like greed, hatred, and delusion, that is Raga, Dosa, and Moha. Morally good consciousness is accompanied by right knowledge, happiness, and detachment. Kriya Chitta or functional consciousness is of special significance. Distinction is made between karma and kriya. Karma stands for mental action, what is called chetana, that is volition. It is this chetana or mental action which generates good or bad fruit and causes samsara. Kriya is a mental act without volition, and hence it does not generate good or bad effects. Non-volitional active mind is more easily possible at the level of form meditation and formless meditation, that is Rupa Dhyana and Arupa Dhyana, but it is possible also at the sensuous sphere. Then we come to Rupa Vachara Chitta. It is a higher level of consciousness because it emerges at the time of Rupa Dhyana, that is meditation on a formed object. Hence, in this class of consciousness types, and also in types higher than this, there is no morally bad consciousness. So the types of consciousness available at this level are morally good consciousness, that is Kushala Chitta, the consciousness resulting from that is Kushala Vipaka Chitta, or functional consciousness, that is Kriya Chitta, which does not give rise to further consciousness. Then we come to Arupa Vachara Chitta. Just as Rupa Vachara Chitta arises in the course of Rupa Dhyana, Arupa Vachara Chitta arises in the course of Arupa Dhyana, that is meditation on formless objects. Similarly, it is also of three kinds: morally good consciousness, consciousness resulting from that, and functional consciousness. Then we come to Lokuttara Chitta. This is supramundane consciousness, which an aspirant who has attained sainthood has. Such saints, that is Ariyas, are of four kinds: stream enterer, that is Sotapanna, once returner, Sakadagami, non-returner, Anagami, and Arhat. Stream enterer is the one who has had a glimpse of nirvana. Such a person will take at the most 7 births for final nirvana. Once returner will take at the most one more birth for nirvana. Non-returner will not be reborn, but will be liberated in this life or after this life in some other world. And Arhat is already liberated. These 4 types of saintly persons are supposed to be in one of the 2 stages, that is path and result, marga and phala. Accordingly, there are 4 into 2, that is 8 types of saints. Hence, Lokuttara Chittas are counted as 8. They are multiplied by 5 types of dhyanas. If they are multiplied by 5 types of dhyanas, then the saintly consciousness becomes of 40 types. So the total number of minds or consciousness becomes 121. Now we come to classification of Chaita or Chaitasika. Chaitas are the factors which arise as the characteristics of different types of consciousness. Like the classification of Chitta, the classification of Chaita also follows a hierarchical arrangement. But there is a difference. because there are some factors, that is chaitas, which arise along with all types of consciousness and are called sarvachitta sadharana. Similarly, there are some factors which are not common to all but can be found in some consciousness. They are called anya samana, common to some others, or prakirnaka, that is particular. The remaining ones are classified in hierarchical order. Now, the factors common to all consciousness are important because they indicate the functioning of consciousness in general. These factors are 7 and are as follows. That is sparsha, contact between consciousness and object. Then vedana, sensation or feeling, which is pleasant, painful or neutral. Then saudhnya, that is perception or recognition due to the use of concepts. Then chetana, volition, which indicates the conative or active part of consciousness, which may stimulate an action. Then ekagrata, that is one-pointedness or determination. Jivitendriya, that is life as a factor controlling consciousness. This is of two types, practical life and mental life. Rupa Jivitendriya and Nama Jivitendriya. Animals and humans have both these Jivitendriyas, whereas plants have only physical life. Actually, I think instead of practical life, it should have been physical life. Physical life and mental life, Rupa Jivitendriya and Nama Jivitendriya. Then, Manasikara, attending an object through mind, literally having some object in mind. So these are all factors common to all consciousness. Now, the factors which are common to some types and not to all, that is anyasadharana or prakirnaka, are 6 in number. They include the aspects of rupadhyana such as vitarka, vichara and priti, initial application, sustained application and joy, and other characteristics, namely adhimoksha, that is decision, virya, that is effort, and chandas, that is desire. Now, the remaining factors are classified into 5 broad categories. Morally bad factors, that is akushala chetasikas. They are 14 in number, which include roots of immorality, that is akushala mula. Other impurities of mind generally included in hindrances, that is nivarana, or fetters, that is sanyojans. Then beautiful factors, that is shobhana sadhara, are 18 in number, which include roots of morality, that is kushala mula, and other physiological and mental qualities useful for moral spiritual practice. Then we have 3 types of moral conduct, that is virati, which include 3 abstinences: abstinence from wrong speech, wrong action, and wrong livelihood, and other 2 abstinences are included elsewhere. Then 2 brahmaviharas, there is karuna and mudita. The other 2 brahmaviharas, namely maitri and upeksha, that is love and equanimity, are included in beautiful factors, that is advesha and tatra madhyasthata. These 4 brahmaviharas are also called immeasurable, that is apramana. Now, another 5th one is among the remaining factors is wisdom, that is prajnendriya. Here it may be noted that over and above the 19 factors which are called shobhana sadharana, the abstinences, brahmavihara, and wisdom are also counted as beautiful. The account of mind and mental factors given above in brief and is brief and sketchy. However, it indicates that early Buddhists were not trying to understand mind and its functions from purely epistemological point of view, but they understood them in the context of morality and spirituality. This moral and spiritual concern is reflected even in the early Buddhist approach to knowledge. Now let us briefly consider the process of knowledge according to early Buddhism. That is, which is called Chittavithi. Unlike many other systems, Buddhists hold that what we regard as knowledge is generally contaminated by mental constructions, which are the effects of avidya or delusion. Due to delusion, there is craving of the form of desire or aversion, and we perceive the object under the influence of this craving. In Buddhist analysis of knowledge, this role of delusion is expressed in many different ways. In Abhidhamma analysis of perceptual knowledge, this role is played by what is called javana, that is impulsion. The following stages take place in perceptual knowledge according to Abhidhamma. First, there is bhavanga or bhavanga. It is the initial stage when mind is in semi-conscious state. Bhavanga is interpreted by some scholars as subliminal consciousness. Then there is bhavanga chalana. This semi-conscious stage of mind gets vibrated. Then there is bhavanga upacheda, that is, this semi-conscious state is arrested. Then dwara varjana, the sense door turns to the object. This is called as sense door consciousness. Then pancha vijnana, this is sensory consciousness of the object. Then sampratikshana, the consciousness receives or grasps the object. Then santirana, that is investigating consciousness. Votthapana or vitthapana, that is determining consciousness. Then the ninth stage is javan, that is impulsion. At this stage, the knower becomes a bhokta if he is an ordinary knower, but he remains a sakshi without enjoyment or suffering if he is an aspirant of high order. Then lastly, tadalambana, that is registering consciousness, and one can say that a samskara is generated at this stage. In later Buddhism, particularly at the hands of Dignaga and Dharmakirti, the role of javana was replaced by the role of vikalpas, that is mental constructions which are guided by beginningless delusion. But in Dignaga Dharmakirti epistemology, vikalpas do not arise after determination, but they constitute determination. In fact, both santirana, that is investigating consciousness, and votthapana, that is determining consciousness, presuppose mental constructions. The issue gets further complicated when we go from Sautrantika school to Yogacara school of Buddhism. According to Sautrantika, the sensory perception can be caused by external objects. For Yogacharyans, the so-called external objects are constructed by mind due to beginningless impression of delusion. Here, I have tried to give a brief account of the nature of mind as it is understood in Shravakayana school of Buddhism. We saw that mind here is understood as consciousness which undergoes change from moment to moment. So here we do not have a single continuous consciousness, but a stream of consciousness. This consciousness can be in subliminal stage as bhavanga chitta. It can assume the form of sensory perception or a mental construction. The objects of this consciousness can be subtle or gross, mental or physical, this worldly or otherworldly, and accordingly we can accept gross or subtle factors associated with consciousness. Different types of consciousness and the mental factors associated with them can be arranged hierarchically, indicating stages in the moral spiritual development of a person. Hence, normative considerations concerning moral spiritual well-being of a person enter inevitably in the Buddhist classification of consciousness. So, in what follows, we will be directly concerned with these normative considerations. So now I will talk about normative approach to mind, the psychology of well-being of a person. The Buddha, by introducing Four Noble Truths, introduced a model for solution of any problem of life. It is sometimes held that the model was already available to him from medical science and he simply applied it to the problem of dukkha. No medical text prior to Buddha is available where the model can be traced. The model is found in later medical texts like Charaka Samhita. The four basic principles of medicine resemble the four noble truths of Buddhism. So, in medical science, we have the principle called disease, that is roga. Then, corresponding to that, the noble truth is dukkha, suffering. Then, in medical science, we have nidana, that is cause of disease. Corresponding to that, in Buddhism, we have the cause of suffering, that is dukkha nidana or dukkha samudaya. Then in medical science, we have arogya, that is the health, which is to be ultimately achieved. And in Buddhism, we have cessation of suffering, that is dukkha nirodha, which is to be achieved. And what is the way to this arogya? It is chikitsa. So that is treatment. And corresponding to that, in Buddha's fourfold model of noble truths, we have path leading to the cessation of suffering. The connection between the two models is not just historical but conceptual. That is why the Buddha was called a great physician, because he gave solution to the great disease called suffering. This model was used later on directly or indirectly by many others. The model, however, can be used in two ways. One, by emphasizing the problem and centering the philosophy of life on it. And two, by emphasizing the goal, the state in which the problem is solved. I call the two approaches the problem-oriented approach and goal-oriented approach. Either you are constantly aware of the problem and try to get rid of it, or you concentrate on the goal of life and think about the path leading to it. The two approaches are, of course, complementary to each other. It is important to note here that Buddha does not discuss the four truths as being on par. He asks different things to be done with the four truths. So, suffering. What is to be done with suffering? Suffering is to be understood fully. Parinyeya. Then the cause of suffering. What is to be done with it? It is to be abandoned. Heya. Then, or praheya. Then the cessation of suffering is to be realized. Bhavaniya. What is to be rather sachikaraniya. And the path to the cessation of suffering is to be brought into practice, that is bhavaniya. In this part, we will discuss the normative Buddhist approach to mind by focusing on the ultimate goal and the path leading to that goal. So what is the ultimate goal of life? According to Shravakayana school of Buddhism, it is arhathood, which is described as follows. The arhat realizes that what was to be accomplished has been done. A heavy burden of sorrow has finally been relinquished, and all forms of craving and all shades of ignorance are totally annihilated. The happy pilgrim now stands on heights more than celestial, far removed from the uncontrolled passions and the defilements of the world, experiencing the unutterable bliss of nirvana. The path leading to arhathood has been variously described as noble eightfold path, that is Arya Ashtangika Marga, threefold training, Trishiksha, and factors of enlightenment, Bodhipakshiya Dharma. The most important aspects of the path are two, morality and meditation. Both of them should be grounded in or supported by wisdom, that is prajna. Morality mainly consists of 5 abstinences, that is abstinence from killing, abstinence from wrong speech, abstinence from stealing, abstinence from sexual misconduct, and abstinence from taking intoxicating things. All these misconducts are to be avoided at all the 3 levels, that is body, speech, and mind. But since they are rooted in mental defilements such as raga, dvesha, and moha, greed, anger, and delusion, Buddhists emphasize the elimination of the mental roots of the misconduct. Hence, special efforts are to be made for purification and cultivation of mind. This is done by the technique of meditation. Hence, meditation plays a very important role in the Buddhist conception of the path leading to the cessation of sufferings. According to Visuddhimagga of Buddha, Buddhism gives us 2 kinds of meditation, that is Samatha Bhavana and Vipassana Bhavana, which are translated as concentration meditation and insight meditation. However, Vipassana, that is direct insight into the nature of reality, can be called the result of meditation and not meditation itself. The type of meditation which leads to this insight can be called as mindfulness meditation or sati meditation. The 2 types of meditation are then concentration meditation and mindfulness meditation, which correspond to the last 2 limbs of the Noble Eightfold Path, namely Samyak Smriti, that is right mindfulness, and Samyak Samadhi, that is right concentration. Now, let us consider the nature of the 2 types of meditation and see how they work. In addition, we shall discuss the practice of Brahma Vihara separately, although they are included in concentration meditation, because they have special significance as the practice of universal application of sublime emotions. So, concentration meditation. Concentration meditation is broadly classified into Rupa Dhyana and Arupa Dhyana. The objects in Rupa Dhyana have sensible form, that is, which could be, of course, real or imaginary. The objects in Arupa Dhyana do not have such a form. They are abstract and subtle. The objects in Rupa Dhyana are concrete. Of course, this does not mean that subtlety is not possible in Rupa Dhyana. In fact, one is supposed to be led to more and more subtle object with the development of Rupa Dhyana. Buddhists conceive of 5 stages in Rupa Dhyana, which are called first Dhyana, second Dhyana, etc., up to 5th Dhyana. In the first Dhyana, one assumes 5 modes of gross contemplation, that is Vitarka, sustained contemplation, that is Vichara, happiness, Priti, then bliss, Sukha, and one-pointedness, Ekagrata. The five elements drop one after the other in each stage, and more equanimity develops in meditation. Buddhism introduces various objects of concentration, both at the level of Rupa Dhyana and Arupa Dhyana. These objects are called as Karmasthana or Kammatthana, and they are 40 in number. 36 objects are objects of Rupa Dhyana, and 4 objects are the objects of Arupa Dhyana. The objects of Rupa Dhyana include 10 material objects, including gross elements and colors, 10 impurities, that is, dead bodies in different miserable conditions. Then 10 reflections, that is, reflection on Buddha, reflection on Dharma, reflection on Sangha, then on deities, on moral qualities, death, mindfulness regarding body, and mindfulness regarding breathing. So these are 10 anusmritis, then 4 immeasurables, that is Brahma Viharas, that is 4 apramanas, then the feeling of loathsomeness of food, ahare pratikula charya, then the analysis of body into four elements, uh, Chaturdhatu Vyavasthanam. So Buddhists note that all these objects are not suitable for all aspirants. Hence, Buddhists classify human beings in terms of their temperaments and allocate different types of dhyanic objects to different temperaments. Some objects, however, are regarded as suitable for all temperaments. So the following table gives a correlation between temperaments and the objects of Rupa Dhyana. So 6 temperaments are lustful temperament, that is Raga Charita, hateful temperament, Dvesha Charita, ignorant temperament, Moha Charita, devout temperament, Shraddha Charita, then intellectual temperament, Buddhi Charita, and discursive temperament, Vitarka Charita. And there are some common objects for all temperaments. For example, the Buddha, then loving kindness, that is Maitri, then mindfulness of body, that is Kayanupashyana, then reflection on death, that is Marananusmriti. These are supposed to be common objects, and there are some specific objects of certain temperaments. So in the case of lustful temperament, that is Raga Charita, impurities, that is dead bodies in different conditions, is prescribed as the object of meditation. And secondly, mindfulness of parts of body is also regarded as the specific object. In the case of hateful temperament, Brahma Viharas, that is 4 Brahma Viharas, are regarded as the specific object, and colored material objects is also regarded as the specific prescribed object. In the case of ignorant temperament, no specific object is mentioned, so all the objects which are common to all, they are applicable to them. Then Shraddha Charita, for them reflection on Buddha, reflection on Dharma, Sangha, etc. These are regarded as the prescribed objects. And Buddhi Charita for such people, for such aspirants, reflection on death, then reflection on peace, perception of loathsomeness of material food, and analysis of body into 4 elements. These are prescribed objects. And in the case of Vitarka Charita, again, no specific object is mentioned. So those objects which are common are also prescribed to them. So as we have seen, with the development of Rupa Dhyana, from first dhyana to fifth dhyana, there develops equanimity, that is upeksha, which becomes the basis of arupa dhyana. In arupa dhyana, one concentrates on subtle and abstract objects as the following: infinity of space, akashanantyayatana, then infinity of consciousness, vijnananantyayatana, nothingness, akinchanyayatana, neither perception nor non-perception, naiva saudnya nasaudnyayatana. Now, arupa dhyana finally culminates into the state called saudnya vedayita nirodha, that is cessation of both perception and sensation. The major outcomes of concentration meditation, which is called as shamatha bhavana, are peace and equanimity. This is suggested by the term samatha in Pali, which refers to both samatva, that is equanimity, and sama, that is shama in Sanskrit, that is peace. But this technique of meditation is incomplete and possibly inadequate for wisdom, that is prajna, or insight into the nature of reality, that is vipassana. For this purpose, the mindfulness meditation is very much important. So let us turn to that. Mindfulness meditation. The Buddha attached great importance to this kind of meditation. In Satipatthana Sutta, he described fourfold mindfulness as a unique way for destruction of suffering, for the purification of beings, for the attainment of wisdom, and for the realization of nirvana. The word sati, Pali, or smriti, Sanskrit, means recollection and also mindfulness. in the context of this type of meditation, the word refers to mindfulness. In the mindfulness meditation, one is supposed to observe vigilantly various aspects of one's own nature and uh, and other things objectively. So, in mindfulness meditation, one is supposed to observe vigilantly various aspects of one's own nature and other things objectively, avoiding projection of subjective elements such as desire, anger, or grief. In this meditation, emphasis is on seeing the things as they are or as they happen. Another important feature of mindfulness meditation is that there is emphasis in it on the changing nature of all phenomena. The changing nature or impermanence also implies non-substantiality, that is anatmata, and unsatisfactoriness, that is dukkhata. Mindfulness meditation in this way leads to realization of the true nature of things, which consists of the three characteristics, that is trilakshana, namely anitya, anatma, and dukkha. Anityata, anatmata, and dukkhata. This realization, in fact, is supposed to develop in three stages. That is what is generally called Shrutamayi Prajna, Chintamayi Prajna, and Bhavanamayi Prajna. In the first stage, it is the understanding based on testimony, when we just believe that things are non-eternal, etc. At the second stage, it becomes a rational understanding, which is based on the reasons and arguments. At the third stage, it is based on meditation, when it becomes a direct awareness of non-eternality, etc. This meditation, paradoxically enough, is both dynamic and passive. The mind operating in it is existentially dynamic, though passive in moral psychological sense. It is dynamic because the mindful consciousness, which takes note of changing phenomena, is not itself constant, but it changes with its object. It is morally and psychologically passive because it does not create or construct or distort its own object, but simply witnesses it as it is given. Mindfulness meditation can be practiced with reference to the following four kinds of objects. One is bodily objects, so that is kayagata sati, various movements of body, parts of the body, and functions of the body, such as in-breathing and out-breathing. Then Vedananupassana, that is sensations as the object, sensations which are pleasant, painful, or neutral, occurring in various parts of our body, that is the object of Vedananupassana. Then Chittanupassana, that is mindfulness of mind, where the object of that mindfulness is different states of mind arising and passing away. And lastly, doctrinal factors, that is Dhammanupassana, the Four Noble Truths, hindrances, that is Nivaranas, enlightenment factors, that is Bodhyangas, that one experiences as the objects of thought. So they are the objects of Dhammanupassana type of mindfulness meditation. So with this discussion of Samatha and Vipassana, where by Vipassana I mainly understand mindfulness meditation, we come to Brahma Vihara. Brahma Viharas, that is universalization of sublime emotions. development of sublime emotional attitudes towards all living beings is an important moral spiritual practice in Buddhism. Though this practice is included in concentration meditation, it deserves a separate discussion because it is essentially social. Whereas other types of concentration meditations are mostly individualistic, Buddhist accepts four Brahma Viharas, as social types of meditation, and Brahma Vihara can be translated as sublime states. And there are four Brahma Viharas, namely Maitri, that is loving kindness, then Karuna, that is compassion, Mudita, joy or appreciating joy, and Upeksha, that is equanimity. The four sublime emotional attitudes together form a systematic whole. The systematic relation among them can be understood in the following way. Now, my relation with others is a complex phenomenon, but broadly speaking, it can be classified into three aspects. In some respects, I am equal to others. I can have dialogue with the other. I can share many things with the other. So this is one type of relation with the other. In some respects, so second type of relation, in some respects, I have got something that the other person lacks. The other person may be suffering on the counts on which I may not be. This is the second type of relation. And the third type of relation, in some respects, I may lack something that the other person has. The other person has achieved some success which I have not achieved. So in this way, the three types of relations are possible with the other. And now the question is, what should be my attitude to the other in those situations? The Buddhist answer is, in the first condition, the proper attitude is Maitri, that is friendliness or loving kindness. In the second condition, the proper attitude is Karuna, that is compassion. In the third condition, the proper attitude is Mudita, that is gladness. Since all these conditions combine in one person in one way or the other, since every other person is all the three, that is equal, inferior, or superior to me in some way, I need to develop all the three sublime attitudes to all the other beings. In this sense, the four attitudes are called immeasurable, that is apramana. They are called Brahma Viharas because they are sublime states. Now, though these attitudes are sublime states, there is a danger that we become attached to these attitudes or get so much involved in these attitudes that one loses happiness or peace of mind. Therefore, maintaining and developing detachment or equanimous attitude in the practice of all the above three attitudes is important, and that is done by concentrating on the fourth Brahma Vihara, that is equanimity, that is upeksha. Though practicing upeksha is important in this way, if we practice only upeksha, then it may make us aloof, disinterested in the pleasures and pains, problems and achievements of others, and it will not be a healthy social attitude. So, upeksha should be counterbalanced by Maitri, Karuna, and Mudita. The four attitudes in this way are to be practiced collectively as mutually balancing ways of developing sublime emotions towards all. Buddha Ghosha in Visuddhimagga systematizes the theory of Brahma Viharas with interesting details. For instance, he talks about near enemies and far enemies of Brahma Viharas, then the stages of developing the sublime attitudes on different subjects and finally making them infinite. So, near enemies and far enemies of Brahma Viharas. The idea of near enemies or indirect enemies and far enemies, that is direct enemies of Brahma Viharas, is useful for determining clearly the nature and scope of the latter. The Brahma Vihara practice implies eradication of the roots of immorality, that is akushala mulas, namely raga, dvesha and moha. Due to immoral roots such as dvesha, we are likely to develop rivalry or ill will towards other equals. This is immoral tendency which is to be replaced by maitri. Similarly, we are likely to develop sadism or cruelty over the deficiencies of others. Such an attitude should be eradicated by developing karuna. Similarly, with reference to progress and success of other beings, we are likely to develop disinterestedness or aversion or sometimes jealousy. Instead of that, we should develop mudita. Similarly, in our friendly or compassionate or joyful interaction with others, we are likely to develop attachment to others. It should be overcome by developing upeksha. In this way, by practicing Brahma Viharas, one is supposed to eradicate their respective direct enemies, namely ill will, cruelty, aversion, and attachment. But there is another danger. Our attempt to develop these sublime attitudes may get degenerated or perverted into development of mundane attitudes which apparently resemble these uh, sublime attitudes, but in fact are ignoble ones. They are supposed to be near enemies of the sublime attitudes. The following table gives near enemies and far enemies of the sublime attitudes as stated by Buddha Ghosh. So with respect to Maitri, greed or raga, selfishness or selfish love is near enemy and ill will is far enemy. Then with reference to Karuna, grief based on home life is a near enemy, cruelty is far enemy. Then with reference to Mudita, joy based on home life is near enemy, aversion is far enemy, and with reference to Upeksha, equanimity qualified by ignorance based on home life is near enemy, and greed or resentment is far enemy. Now we come to stages in the development of sublime emotions. Ultimately, each of the Brahma Viharas is to be practiced immeasurably, that is, apramana, that is, with respect to all the living beings in the world. But they cannot be practiced suddenly like that. One will definitely feel practical difficulties in practicing certain Brahma Viharas with reference to certain kinds of persons. For instance, practicing loving kindness with hostile persons is not possible at the first stage. Or practicing loving kindness with the other sex at the first stage may cause erotic attraction rather than sublime feelings. But ultimately, developing sublime feelings is required in this type of practice, even with respect to such persons. In order to make this possible, one has to begin with those types of persons with whom it is easy to practice a particular sublime attitude, and then stage by stage cover more and more difficult cases. Buddha Ghosh gives in detail the order of the persons towards whom the four Brahma Viharas can be practiced, as given in the following table. So, loving kindness is to be practiced first with oneself, then revered and respected persons, then dearly loved friends, then neutral persons, and ultimately with hostile persons. Then compassion is to be practiced first with unlucky, wretched persons, then with evil doing persons, then dear one, then neutral persons, and ultimately hostile persons. Gladness is to be practiced first with companion, dear persons, then with neutral persons, then with hostile persons, and then with rest others. And equanimity is to be practiced first with neutral persons, then dear ones, and then rest others. Narada Thera calls these Brahmaviharas four sterling virtues and says these virtues tend to elevate man. They make one divine in this life itself. They can transform man into a superman if all try to cultivate them, irrespective of creed, color, race, or sex. This earth can be transformed into a paradise where all can live in a perfect peace and harmony as ideal citizens of one world. So now I come to the last part of my presentation, and that is about Mahayana Buddhist approach to mind. So far, we have considered the Shravakayana approach to mind. In this small section, I will make some brief remarks on the Mahayana approach to mind. Of course, one point should be common between Shravakayana approach and Mahayana approach to mind. Both of them attach importance to mind and emphasize removal of the impurities of mind. But then there are some fundamental differences also. First, we will consider the differences at descriptive level and then at normative level. At descriptive level, we can ask the question, what is the existential status of mind in the world? We have seen that according to Shravakayana, Nama and Rupa both are real. As Abhidhammatthasan holds, Rupa, Chitta, Chetasika and Nibbana all are Paramatha Dhammas. Mahayana has a different approach to them. Under Mahayana, we have to consider, of course, two schools separately, namely Yogacara and Madhyamika. Yogacara holds that mind only exists, external objects which consist of matter do not exist at all. External objects are just unreal constructions of mind. So, in the ideal situation, the mind simply stops seeing the external world, non-apprehension of the external world itself is the veridical perception of the external world. Anupalambha of the external world itself is the upalambha of the reality. Now, Madhyamika Buddhism, who does not go to this extent, but it regards all phenomena, including mind and matter, as essenceless, nisvabhava, and therefore shunya. Realization of essencelessness is itself realization of truth. In every conscious state, there arises naturally this subject-object duality. Shravakayana does not try to negate it because the object is not unreal according to it. So the problem is not about the existence of the object. The question is whether you face the object as it is given in experience without contaminating the perception through the unwholesome roots, namely attachment, hatred, and delusion. It is possible to remove the unwholesome roots and make the consciousness pure and peaceful. This is Shravakayana approach, which I think is more realistic. Mahayana approach, on the other hand, questions this nature of empirical consciousness. Yogacharyans claim that the subject-object duality of consciousness is itself due to misconception, and ultimately consciousness is without any duality. Similarly, Madhyamikas hold that our belief that consciousness and objects have their own nature is itself a wrong belief, an expression of craving. At normative level also, there is an important difference between the two approaches. We have seen that Shravakayana cherishes Arhat ideal. Arhat is a fulfilled person who is not going to be reborn. Mahayana cherishes the altruistic or universalistic ideal of a bodhisattva. Bodhisattva takes a vow to strive for the welfare of others and desires to be reborn again and again until all the living beings are liberated. This difference between Arhat ideal and Bodhisattva ideal is sometimes highlighted, such that the Arhat ideal is individualistic or egoistic, whereas the Bodhisattva ideal is altruistic or universalistic. This difference is supposed to be one of the main reasons why Shravakayana is called the lower vehicle, that is Hinayana, by the Mahayanis. Personally, I feel that the so-called glaring contrast between the two ideals is misleading. An Arhat may not be called an individualist or an egoist person. This is because the moral spiritual pursuit, which is a part of the path leading to Arhathood, consists of the practice of Brahma Viharas. The practice of Brahma Viharas includes developing the sublime attitudes, namely Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, and Upeksha, and addressing them to all beings universally or immeasurably. Since Arhat has already developed these qualities, he cannot be just an individualist or egoist person. The difference, therefore, will be with regard to continuation of this practice in the subsequent birth or births. Hence, the issue gets associated with the question of rebirth, particularly the question whether one can be reborn at will. Instead of going into this question here, I will keep the question open. With this, I complete my presentation. I thank you all for bearing with me, although, as I said, my presentation is something like odd man out. Thank you very much.
Do you have any question? If you have any question, then you can interact with Professor Gokhale. Yeah, come. Come on the podium. Yeah, yeah. Come.
Good afternoon, Gokhale sir.
Yes,
Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. So I just want to ask, though you have, through your article, I can know that you have did a good research on Mahayana and Theravada both. So what is your view on the self? Like, what do you think? Not about the, I'm not about talking about the Atma one. I'm talking about the conceptual way of self. What do you think about self? Do you think there's a consciousness of ours, the subtle consciousness is self or something else? And why do you think such?
I mean, what I said in my talk about self, I'm distinguishing between empirical self and metaphysical self.
Yeah.
So, we have to refer to ourselves as body-mind complex, although we cannot say that there is a single substance or something like avayavi, that is composite whole, as for example Nayayikas would talk about. So self is not a composite whole, self is not a permanent substance. So in that sense, I will not accept the existence of self. But we do, we do refer to something when we are asked about I and mine, who are you? Then we will refer to our body and also to mind, that is mental states. So in that sense, empirical self has to be a point of reference, has to be accepted as a point of reference.
Yeah, I'm just asking about the empirical self about.
Uh-huh.
So like normally when we analyze ourselves, we feel like where if a person tell like if you want Buddha's mind, Buddha's consciousness, like omniscient mind, do you want to change your consciousness with the omniscient? we will definitely say yes. That means that our consciousness is not a self. So empirical level, we still consider there is something self, which is not a collection of the all the skandha. We can't say the collection of skandha is also a self in Buddhism. So what do you think, like, how can we put a point on the self in empirical level?
No, I mean there is something like Buddha consciousness, which is omniscient. Personally, I am not inclined to accept these ideas. I mean, I would because the question of omniscience is also there. Buddha himself did not say that I am omniscient. Later on, people started calling him omniscient because when I mean some way of life, some social way of practices becomes a religion. Naturally, there is such a demand that the leader of that religion has to be regarded as omniscient, if not omnipotent. Also, that is a different thing altogether. But omniscience becomes a need, and then this is attributed to the leader of the religion. So in the case of Buddhism, I think that some such thing has happened. And in Milinda Panyu, we find discussions about omniscience, in what sense Buddha can be called omniscient. So there can be different senses in which we can talk of omniscience. Actually, I have one article in my Academia EDU site. I have an article on omniscience in Buddhism, in not just in Buddhism, but in Indian philosophy in general. That is, when we talk of, for example, Mahavira, Lord Mahavira as omniscient, what is the meaning of omniscience? When we talk of Buddha as omniscient, what are the different meanings associated with it? And so on and so forth. That is omniscience in dispositional sense, omniscience in episodic sense. So there can be different connotations of omniscience.
Sir, can I ask another question?
Yeah. Continue.
Okay, sir, I'm about to ask another question.
Another question.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sir, when you are talking about the Brahma Vihar, sorry for my Hindi pronunciation, not good. So Brahma, like four immeasurables, immeasurable when you are talking. So there's a question arise in me, like where you wrote in your article, like all the sentient beings, which is included when you are talking about the four Brahma Vihar and immeasurables, you have included sentient beings. So there's a question arise, like whether we include arhat in these sentient beings or not, whether in the four immeasurable, when we meditate on four immeasurables, do we have to put the arhat as an object or not? Because if Lord Buddha is meditating on the immeasurable, he may definitely put arhat, because he know that arhat is a lower than him, as arhat is not a parinirvan one. So do you consider him in inclusion as an object in immeasurable meditation or not, Arhat?
I am suggesting that practice of Brahma Viharas or meditation on Brahma Viharas is a part of the spiritual practice that one who is aspiring for arhathood has to do. So naturally, it has practiced it, and it is a part of his nature. So you cannot say that arhat is only self-centered and he is only concerned with his own pleasure and not concerned with happiness of others. Only the question is whether he will he will think that I want to continue this practice even after my death. In the case of Mahayana Buddhism, they would say that Bodhisattva wants to continue his altruistic practice after death in different lives. In the case of Arhat, in the case of Arhat, this is his last life. But how will he behave in this life? Will he just self-centered? I don't think so.
No, my question is not this, sir. I was asking, like, when you are practicing the immeasurable meditation, when you are practicing Brahma Vihar meditation, you are practicing on love and kindness and all these things. So you have just showed up, like whom we have to show love, like for our enemy, neutral, for our relatives. You show this in a chart. So when you practice love, can we practice a love toward our arhat in this immeasurable practice?
So,
Yes,
what are the addresses of Brahma Vihar?
yeah, can we?
And there are some limits on that. That is, for example, when you are talking of Karuna, suppose there is someone who has no sufferings at all, how can you develop Karuna towards such a person? So, I mean, such exceptions can be made, of course. There is no doubt about that. I do agree with your point that so I cannot make. I don't know about Maitri, but with reference to Karuna, certainly there will be some limitations.
Thank you.
Yes.
Dr. Niti ji.
Pranam, sir.
Pranam.
Sir, in your article, you showed a table where you were showing the similarity, or you can, what we can say, similarity or comparison between the models of medical sciences and
Yes.
the four noble truths. So
Mhm.
I just wanted to ask, sir, it's a very small query, whether
Mhm.
medical science and the model of medical sciences are influenced with Buddhism, or it's just a coincidence that we can establish such a similarity or comparison between the two?
Of course, it is very difficult to decide, but it is said that Buddha has adopted this particular model, which is already available in the case of diseases in general, diseases rather. And this model he applied to all, I mean, suffering as a more general problem. But I mean, it is not necessary that because this model, one can even think about it independently of the available model of because it is a very general model, scientific model. When you talk about a problem and you talk about it deeply, then naturally you want to go to the root of the problem and solve the problem, prove the problem. So this it is possible that one can think about this model independently also. It is not necessary that he must have adopted it from medical model. So I'm not, I'm not holding any particular view on this point.
Yeah, thank you, sir. But as I think that the ancient model of medical treatments or finding out the nidan
Yes,
or
yes,
treatment for any
yes,
kind of diseases were the same even
yes,
before Buddhism.
yes,
When
yes,
in ancient India, the people were practicing that how to recognize that what kind of disease a person is having, and then
yes,
how to treat that person. That the
yes,
same method was applied. So
yes.
I don't find it that why medical sciences are being compared with the Buddhist Four Noble Truths parts, etc. So that was just a
No, no,
tiny.
the point is, I mean, for example, medical practice is sometimes done in just symptomatic way. For example, if you go to a homeopath, he will not go to the root of the problem. He will just make a list of all the symptoms and accordingly he will choose the medicine which fits with all the symptoms. That's all.
Yeah.
But in Ayurveda, if you go to an Ayurveda practitioner, then he will first try to find out the cause of the disease. He will not just go by symptoms.
Definitely.
And on the basis of the cause, he will decide the treatment because he wants that the cause should be removed and so that the disease is removed fully
Yeah.
from the root. So Ayurveda model is very close to Buddha's model of Four Noble Truths. That much we can say. Whether he adopted his own model of Four Noble Truths from Ayurveda or not, I mean, there is no, there are references in Pali literature that this is like that. This Buddha's model is like Ayurvedic model. And Buddha is also called Bhishagvara, Vishagraj, the great say physician. But it is difficult to say that he adopted it from that or what.
Yeah.
It is
Thank you.
possible. it is possible in both ways.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Any more question? Come to the podium.
धन्यवाद सर। सर
धन्यवाद, प्रणाम।
मेरा प्रश्न ये है कि
हम्म।
जो निर्वाण है आहार, वो प्राप्त किसको होता है? जो व्यक्ति है जो कि नाम रूप आदि से संयुक्त होता है, जो कि प्रतिक्षण बदलता रहता है, यदि उसने आज कर्म किए, कार्य किए हैं, आज मान लो कि मुझे निर्वाण की प्राप्ति के लिए एक इच्छा आई और मैं उसके लिए प्रयासरत हुआ, तो मुझे जो निर्वाण मिला है, जब मान लो मिलता है, तो उस समय तो मैं परिवर्तनशील हो गया सर। तो वो निर्वाण किसको मिला है? जो मैंने शुरुआत किया था, जो विचार से जो मैं था पहले, या जो प्राप्त हो गया निर्वाण उसको मिला है? ये क्या सर, इसको बौद्ध दर्शन में कैसे समझेंगे सर? और निर्वाण की क्या सर परिभाषा दी जा सकती है, या फिर जैसे वैदिक परंपरा में इसको कहा गया है कि गूंगा यदि रसगुल्ला खाता है तो उसका जो है कुछ डिफाइन नहीं कर पाता, उसको परिभाषित नहीं कर पाता कि उसका स्वाद कैसा था। तो सर किस तरह से निर्वाण है बौद्ध दर्शन? यही सर प्रश्न। धन्यवाद।
बहुत ही बड़ा प्रश्न है और उत्तर देना उतना आसान नहीं है। क्या है निर्वाण के बारे में एक अंतर तो करना चाहिए कि निर्वाण का साक्षात्कार होना और हम जब कहते हैं कि निर्वाण प्राप्त होना, इन दोनों में अंतर करना पड़ेगा। कि जैसे ध्यान करते समय एक ऐसी दशा, एक ऐसी स्थिति आएगी कि जब ये संज्ञा वेदयित निरोध, यानी कोई ज्ञान का विषय ज्ञात नहीं हो रहा है और एक सिर्फ एक शांति है, शांति की स्थिति है, और इस स्थिति का अनुभव हुआ है। और यह अनुभव ये निर्वाण का अनुभव है। इसका अर्थ ऐसा नहीं है कि हमें निर्वाण प्राप्त हो गया। हाँ, निर्वाण का अनुभव होना और निर्वाण की प्राप्ति होना, और ये अंतिम निर्वाण, ये और भी एक अलग बात है कि यानी निर्वाण का साक्षात्कार जैसे सोतापन्न स्थिति में भी होता है। जब निर्वाण का साक्षात्कार होता है तभी वो सोतापन्न हो जाता है, और अर्हत पद में वह निर्वाण एक स्थायी चीज बन जाती है, ऐसा मैं समझता हूँ, यानी मेरे मर्यादित आकलन के अनुसार।
So I think there is no question at all. So ask.
Okay. Hello, sir. Thank you for your paper. I liked it very much. So my question is, sir, that when you say that Arhat don't have self-centered attitude, I truly agree, because they practice for Brahmavihara, immeasurable compassion and all. But on the other hand, when we look at Mahayana practitioner, they with Brahmavihara, they also practice bodhicitta. So bodhicitta is something and mind which wants everyone to be free from the suffering. So in that way, what will you say, sir? Is it really that Arhat, they do have that mind, the bodhicitta mind? So when we say we don't have self-centered attitude or self-centered attitude, so in that way, we say that, okay, somebody have immeasurable compassion and then immeasurable loving kindness. So how do you say through that? And one question added to that, sir. In that context, if we say that obviously Arhat is a very sublime and supreme being, but what does actually immeasurable compassion and immeasurable loving kindness means, sir? Because if we ask somebody what is compassion, the answers mostly the people give is what loving kindness. And if we ask what is loving kindness, then they say that it is immeasurable compassion. So in that way, how do you will describe it, sir? The mudita and karuna. Thank you.
Now, two questions. I mean, first question is about say difference between bodhisattva, bodhicitta on the one hand, and the attitude of the arhat on the other hand. What I have suggested is that both of them have immeasurable. That is, they are developing and they are practicing immeasurable love and compassion towards others and trying to help others. But the bodhisattva's way of looking at life is different, because he is looking at this life only as a small part of the say endless cycle of lives. He is not trying to bring end to his samsara. Samsara in the sense of cycle of births and deaths, cycle of births and rebirths. In the case of Arhat, he has realized that this is his last life. He is not going to be born again. But while leading this life, he could be, I am saying, full of compassion, love, and so on and so forth. And he is behaving with people in a particular way. So, so the way in which both of them are behaving may be closely similar. Only the thing is that the bodhisattva is looking at this life only as one step towards the cycle of so many lives. He is looking at it, whether actually he will have rebirth or not. I mean, this is a very different type of question. I mean, whether we should believe in rebirth or not. This itself is a different type of question. I'm not going into that question here. Now, secondly, how to understand the difference between Maitri and Karuna. So, as I have tried to explain, that in Maitri, it is just loving kindness, the form of which is in terms of pleasure or happiness. That is, may all beings be happy. That is, so one is not focusing on the sufferings that people are having, but he is only having a kind of positive attitude towards all beings, and he is willing that may all beings be happy. That's all. Now, when we are talking of Karuna, this Arhat or any aspirant who is practicing Karuna is focusing on sufferings of the people. So, all the people are suffering, and may their sufferings be removed, may them be free from sufferings. That is the form of Karuna. So, form of Maitri and form of Karuna, although there is something common between them, because removal of suffering and attainment of happiness, they are very close to each other, but I mean, conceptually, they are not exactly the same. So both of them are important. When you are considering the unhappiness of others and thinking that unhappiness may be removed, that is a different attitude. And when we are, maybe that people are happy, but then let them continue to be happy. Even that is a part of Maitri approach, Metta approach.
So now it's okay. Okay. So thank you, sir, very much. Thank you.
Thank you
For your deep, extensive, and elaborative teaching of the concept of mind in Buddhist schools. You taught not only as per the text Abhidhammatthasan, but you tried to cover almost all schools of Buddhism, and you deeply discussed and have a nice interaction with the participants. So once again, I thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.